Good evening, everyone, and warm welcome to today's webinar titled "Cries That Have No Tears: Understanding Elderly Patients' Rights in India." I am Sunil Nandraj, Associate at Health Systems Governance Team at Health Systems Transformation Platform. As a part of HSTP's commitment to foster policy dialogues on health systems governance, we have been organizing discussions and webinars with different stakeholders of health systems. And today, this time, we are observing the International Day of Older Person, which falls on 1st October. So we're kind of just one day early. And this year's theme, UN's theme for 2022 is Resilience of Older Persons in Changing World. As we all are aware that India is ongoing a demographic shift and is home to more than 100 million elderly people. So it becomes important to, initiate a discussion on the several aspects of this group. For all the external audience, we are pleased to have 5 panelists with expertise in medical and legal fields, a caregiver, patients' rights activist, who all are actively involved with the elderly group in the various capacities. In the interest of time, I would request all participants to type your question in the Q&A box in your control panel, and we'll have time for discussion towards the end of the webinar. Now, without further ado, I would welcome my CEO, HSTP, Mr. Rajesh Sadanandan, former Additional Chief Secretary of the Health and Family Welfare Department, Government of Kerala. Sir has held positions in both the central and state government in various roles and has worked in the areas of healthcare systems, healthcare policy, health economics, and among others. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sonali. Once again, welcome to all the panelists and participants. Thank you for attending the webinar today. This is one of our, we have a strategy of encouraging dialogue on issues that are not salient in the discourse on health. And this has been arranged as part of it, the webinar on elderly patients' rights in India. The proposal came from Dr. Dhanak Kanwar, who interned with us, and is organized by the Health Systems Governance Group at HSTP. Now, for the topic, the contours are well known. In India, the percentage of people aged above 60 will grow from the current 10.5 to 25% by 2050. And unfortunately, it doesn't look as if we are ready for it. There's a wide variation between states, the percentage of the aged people. Which is also a kind of opportunity because the share of the age is dependent on demographic transition, which itself is driven by lower fertility and mortality. So there is going to be a high correlation between there could be a high correlation between the percentage of elderly and the health system competence. Now, ideally, this should be a positive thing. But when you look at the states that could have made the difference, and if they had begun to work on time, one can't get the feeling that they may have missed the bus. And the other states where the capacity may not be that high have a window of opportunity to work on issues that could prevent the repeat of what happened in the other states. What's also worrying is that because the greater life expectancy among women, the increased feminization of aging, the problem is compounded by the stigma attached to widowhood. Now, coming to the topic of today, when you look at geriatric care, it exposes some of the fault lines of the Indian healthcare system. For example, if we had universal coverage and the healthcare needs of the elderly would have been paid by tax or social health insurance funded health system, which would have resulted in an intergenerational subsidy, which would have gone again and again. But unfortunately, we don't have one. So currently, most of the treatment is funded out of pocket. Now, the problem is that since many of the aged will not have the money to pay, they are dependent on the other members of family. Now, if families adopt a utilitarian approach regarding decisions on out-of-payment, the treatment needs of elderly are likely to get deprioritized as they have reduced influence on decision-making. It's even worse for women. Secondly, if India had a functional primary care system, a really functional primary care system, where the PHC team is responsible for long-term health of individuals, they would have uh, 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 taken the preventive steps or the promotional steps that would have reduced the possibility of ill health and old age, and also provided ambulatory and outreach service for the elderly. The third factor is that the lack of competence on geriatric care. We have a clinician with us today. The piecemeal approach to treatment, which is the organ-based approach or system-based approach to treatment, which characterizes clinical care today, actually could lead to harm of the to an aged person. This is partly alleviated by the specialty of geriatric care, who are tuned to the needs of something like this. Again, had there been a primary care system, the initial triaging could have been done by the primary care doctor, and then he or she could have referred to the appropriate provider, specialist. And also, this would have been backed by institutional memory and longitudinal data. Unfortunately, we are still not going to have that. Now, when you look at the policy and systems, frankly, it's rather very scanty. The constitutional provisions are in the directive principles. There is a Maintenance of Parents and Citizens Act of 2007, and the provision of the Criminal Procedure Code, in which some bit of relief is being given to aged persons today. The national health policy sadly has very little explicit commitments on the health of the aged. Old age is mentioned once. Senior Citizens Act is referred once. Terms such as aged and older people, elderly, are never used. And while discussing health status and program impact, there is no mention of any objectives that refer to geriatric health. The National Policy on Older Persons 1999, which is almost the only legislation that looks at the needs of the elderly, has got some detailed prescriptions. It has also got some recommendations. This policy was to have been updated by a National Policy on Senior Citizens 2011, which is available as a draft document, but it's not been accepted yet. Two programs that have an impact on the care of the elderly, which I'm sure will be covered by the speakers today. One is a national program for the healthcare of the elderly. If you look at the program, it has all the objectives of what the program that cares for the elderly should have. Whether it's being implemented is something that could possibly come from the panelists and other people who are participating in the seminar. But an interesting change that has happened on the government-funded health insurance, that is the RSBY, is that in RSBY, sorry, the number of families, the number of persons in a family who could be, sorry, number of persons who could be covered in the family was restricted to 5. So the families had no incentive to cover their elderly patient. Under the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, that has been taken away. The packages and the 5 lakh ensures that 5 lakh cover ensures that most of the services can actually be provided. In fact, sometimes I think whether, like you have the extension of the Medicaid in US, whether this can't be extended to cover all the persons aged above 65, except the richest, of course. This is a financing platform which it could be examined whether if it is expanded and adequately resourced can cover the hospitalization needs of the senior persons. What I've tried to do is to give the policy and the health system background of this, and I hope it will provide a background to the panelists who are going to come up. Once again, welcome to this webinar, and we look forward to hearing from the expert panelists. I now invite Sunil Nandraj to join the to speak.
Thanks, Rajiv, and thanks to everybody. More important, thanks, Ganak. I think as an I like what you did in terms of patients' rights, and all credit goes to Dhanak. And I'm liking that HSTP is able to provide that kind of space to interns to take up areas which they are quite keen on. I just like to place it in the larger context, my views. Uh, there's a lot of discussion on patients' rights. Everybody is at the drop of a hat starts talking about patients' rights. But at HSTP, we give a lot of importance to patients, and very important that they become the center. Good that Dhanak took up the geriatric. We are also looking at, we would like to also look at patients' rights in a contextual manner. One of the patients' rights I think Sonali is working on is ambulances. What are your rights? What are the minimum standards related to ambulance? Because patients' rights without something specific, according to me, quite vague, and it's very generic. It has to be. And I think Pallavi also would work on something on the laboratories. She's writing a paper and very specific. What are your rights? This comes out of our work, Sonali and mine and others, on what are your rights vis-a-vis a pharmacy shop, vis-a-vis what should be there, and knowing what, when you say you need a right, you should know what is supposed to be there, rather than, saying. So we are working on it, and I do hope my other colleagues will be looking at it very specifically, bringing out not just papers, but pamphlets in various languages. I like to bring it out in terms of patients' rights, uh, and also geriatric population in terms of how we look at human beings. What is the value of a life in US, and what is the value of a life in India? I mean, 45 people died in India. Oh, it's okay. 2 people affected in New Orleans. Everybody starts jumping. So I think, well, how do we look at human life? That becomes important. Another issue I would like to raise is the issue of power relations in medicine. That becomes one thing very important in terms of what is the power relation that holds between the provider and the patient, whoever it is, more so elderly population. Because what I am finding is uh, that in our country, healthcare is not patient-centric, but doctor-centric. How everything moves around to that specialist or that doctor. We talk about healthcare, not in terms of teamwork, but very specific to doctors, as if they are the only ones who are providing healthcare. And so that is another thing. Another aspect when we talk about patients' rights, it's also the entire issue of supplier-induced demand. How do you view that in the context of patients' rights? The entire commercialization of medicine, where do patients' rights come in? When medicine is so highly commercialized, it's no more a providing succor to somebody who's suffering, but it is based on the dividend you get in the share market and how you trade healthcare in stock market. Where do patients come in? I mean, they are marketable commodities. They are consumers. They are not patients. They become things that we need to get the maximum out in terms of commercial. So I'm really looking at it in the broader sense, and that's what is happening in our country. Mm, and this happens both in the public and in the private and the not-for-profit sector. It's not that not-for-profit sector is a goody-goody sector. The place I come from, Bombay, we don't have corporate hospitals. We only have charitable hospitals, including the likes of Hinduja or Breach Candy or whatever. One of the important things which we are really working is the failure of regulations. We do not, where we have regulations, we are not able to implement it. We are One of the important things, lastly, I would look at is where are the grievance redressal mechanisms? Are there grievance redressal mechanism to exercise your rights at the facility level, at the government level? I mean, what do I do with a good patient's rights? It can remain on paper. I think I would leave with this. At the end of the day, it is who's accountable. Are we accountable to the patients when they walk into the facility? Are we transparent in our treatment, in our behavior? And that covers the patient's thing. And according to me, my slightly different. Patients have already exercised their rights by saying no to public healthcare services. The very fact that people do not go to public healthcare services or do not go to certain private unless they don't have a choice. I mean, they are exercising their rights. When my maid servant says, I don't want to go to a public hospital next door, she is exercising her rights. And I think more than that, and that's where a day might come where we might have to close down our health departments, and that would be the day I'll be really looking forward to. With this, I will just stop. Thank you. Pallavi.
Yeah. Thanks, Sunil. That was quite controversial, closing down the health department. But just to get back to the team that is part of organizing this webinar, with which Dhanak worked. So I'm Pallavi Gupta. I work as a specialist in the health systems governance team at HSTP. My colleague Sonali and Sakshi and I work together, and Sunil is our advisor for this work. And Dhanak, during her internship, thought of this webinar and this topic. Very quickly, to give you a brief of the work that our team has been doing in the last couple of years. So we started looking at some of the legislations related to healthcare delivery in India. We did a study on that. And since then, we did a couple of webinars on the Clinical Establishments Act. We did one on public health reporting, on how health is reported by the mainstream media. And we also undertook a study on home health care. And while more on that study later on, just that in this study, we found that elderly as a population are a significant group of users for home health care. So when we think of elderly care, it's not only health facility level care, it's also home level care that will come in handy in years to come and may become an important part of the healthcare delivery too, for the elderly especially. We have a repository on our website where we've put together some of the legislation related to health, divided them into 28 categories. If someone wants to use them, that resource is open and free for anyone to use. And like we always share, that people are also free to collaborate with us. If we want to share, then we can do that jointly as well, with due acknowledgements to everyone who contributes. So basically, we want to work on governance and regulation, strengthening healthcare regulation in the country, and we do so in collaboration with other organizations, and we're always looking forward to working with others as partners. In that spirit, we organize such events where we come to meet people who are working on similar issues, like-minded organizations, and then also look for opportunities to work together. So I won't take much time and end here, and I will now call Dhanak to take the proceedings further. Dhanak, over to you, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening to one and all present. I welcome you, or I welcome and extend welcome to all the panelists, and thank you for sparing their valuable time to be here. I would like to start now this session by briefly talking about why today's topic is of paramount importance, and we'll be sort of giving a context for further discussions in today's evening. So with the introduction, I'll be talking why this discussion is important and what are the factors that have led to the current situation. So an inevitable consequence of the demographic transition and the shift to lower fertility rates has been the evolution of an age structure which is different in today's world population. Many societies, particularly those in more developed areas, already have population age structures that are older than ever before. According to the UN report of World Aging Population 2019, by 2050, this number, there is a number 605 million people in the world. These many people are expected to increase to almost 2 billion, which is this is the population of the elderly people. And when it will be equal to the size of the population of children by the year 2050. The number of children and older people will be equal for the first time at this monumentous crossover of an increasing share of older people and a decreasing share of children. And talking about the Indian scenario, the addition of the elderly population during the year from the year 2001 to 2011 was more than 27 million. For the preparation of a prospective plans in various socio-economic sectors, this projected population for the ensuing years is necessary. According to the report of the Technical Group on Population Projections in India and States, 2011 to 2036, these years, the population will be 67 million men, that will be the population of men, and 71 million women will be aged 65 and older. And this is the population that is projected in India as for the year 2021. So I would like to briefly talk about why this discussion is important and why is it needed. So in many areas of the healthcare system, the aging of the global population and the prevalence of chronic diseases are having a significant impact. The potential patients who will increasingly require more care appropriate for the elderly. Sharing information with relatives of elderly patients in primary care and hospitals has to fit into the complex set of obligations, justifications, and pressures concerning the provision of information and exploring the issues of patient autonomy, patient privacy, and informed consent in the day-to-day care of older people. According to a survey by the Agewell Foundation in 2018, in which they interacted and surveyed over 5,000 elder people across the country, it was found that 85.9% of the older people have never heard about human rights of older persons. And over 23.3% of older persons were found living in inhumane conditions, or in other words, facing violation of human rights in old age. Approximately every third elderly in the country is not getting proper medicine and healthcare in old age. And to basically conclude it, I would like to focus on the fact that only 28.8% of older people have access to medicines and healthcare or medical facilities, according to the survey done by the Agewell Foundation. So these are the mainly the topics why and the issues why this conversation or this discussion is important. And without further ado, I would like to now invite our first panelist for the evening. I would like to invite Dr. Rakesh Kakkar. Dr. Kakkar is the professor and head of Department Community and Family Medicine, AIIMS Bhatinda. He is presently he has received the Presidential Appreciation Award from ISCOM 2018. His main area of interest are geriatrics, health system research, TB, and NCDs. Sir is currently working on the research projects he's working related to geriatrics are assessment of nutrition and morbidity status and utilization of healthcare facilities in the elderly population and above from the year 2015 and 17 as a co-investigator. And he is also working in a research project, a geriatric friendly clinic, primary healthcare, and age-friendly approach as the principal investigator. So I would now like to call upon Dr. Kakkar for the proceeding the session. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Dhanika, for inviting me for this important event. So before that, first
Sir, are you trying to share your screen?
yeah, I'm trying.
Okay.
Is it visible now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah. So first, I would like to thank the Health System Transformation Platform for inviting me for this important topic. And I'm thankful to Mr. Rajiv Sadanandan, CEO, Mr. Sunil Nandraj, Ms. Pallavi, Dhanak, and all other dignitaries who have joined this workshop. So I agree with some of the issues raised by the Mr. Rajiv, and I can discuss a bit about issues raised by Mr. Sunil. Like it is sometimes very easy to say that government functionaries are not working as expected, but since I have worked in both the setups, like in private setup earlier and now serving it at the AIMS, and I have experience of running geriatric friendly clinic for a long time. So like expectation of people, maybe due to various reasons, like maybe due to the economic reason or the facilities present at the government hospitals, we are overburdened with the patient. So sometimes we do want to give a proper time to each patient, but sometimes due to overburdening of the centers, it is very difficult. So it's not like that the government is not giving a proper attention in these areas. Like at AIMS Bathinda, we are now planning to have a geriatric ward and geriatric department also with us. And with time, the things are improving, but again, the patient load is quite high. So sometimes it is difficult to manage, even though our intention and the intention of other health professional is good, but sometimes it is very difficult. So rather, I would like to say that if we want to solve this problem, we have to work not on a single way, but rather we have to focus on the individual level, at the individual level, that is at the geriatric level, then at their family level, the healthcare provider level, and also largely at the policy level. So I will discuss all these issues, though the time allotted is very less, but I will cover as much as time allows me, and then we can discuss it further. So as we know that our health minister, the then health minister, Naddaji, declared that this 2020 to 2030 is a decade of healthy aging. And the basic aim is to not only to add the years, but to add the quality also. So not only the quantity, as the life expectancy is increasing, it's evident. And Dhanak has already shown some slides. So it is evident that it is increasing at a very fast pace, and we have to focus more towards the quality component also. So here you can see that 50+ population is rapidly increasing. Since at present we have a large database of our pyramid is having the base is having a lot of young adult citizen. So this in coming time will have every fourth person will be 50+ in next 15 years, and by 2036, 50% population will be around 4 times that of under 5 children. So we will need more geriatricians rather than having mainly focusing on maternal and child health group only. So this, since the this population is going up. So we need more focus from the policymakers to give us the more resources. At present, we are spending very less on these resources, but there is a need of more such services at government level, and only government cannot do so. Private facilities provide a good kind of services, but these are very costly. So we have to work on that also to provide insurance, and like insurance is not available for this geriatric adults, especially over 70s. So the insurance provided to them is inadequate, or it is very difficult to access this affordable health insurance. So the rush comes towards the government side. Then we have to realize that after, if you'll see this, the first graph, between 50 to 40, 54 group, age group, and then 60 to 64 age group, there is a huge rise, that is around 18% rise in the population. So almost every second person above 50 will have at least one comorbid condition. And if they will have more such condition, then there is increased hospitalization. So this load will further increase, and this will increase further burden on the hospitals. So we have to prepare it according to these conditions. So if it is coupled with a non-communicable disease as well as with influenza or pneumococcal infection, then this hospitalization will increase further. So there's a need of providing vaccines to them. But at present, our health system is not ready for that. But we have to realize these conditions, that if we want to decrease the load and if we want to really decrease the out-of-pocket expenditure, then we have to focus on these preventive aspects. And for that, policy level decisions are required. So sometimes it is seen in various health facilities that if our healthcare practitioners are not well versed with a geriatric care, then often it is told that you are wasting the doctor's time. Don't bring such small things, even though some geriatric people are facing some problems like pain or gastritis or some other problems are there. So we have to give a proper attention towards these. And sometimes it is also thought that they invent illnesses because they feel marginalized. So these aspects are also there. So ageism in healthcare impacts the quality of geriatric care, and sometimes it also affects the patient-provider communication, as well as the habits and behavior of elderly individual. So as already pointed out by Ms. Tanak, that around 86% of the elderly people are unaware of their rights. So there is a need of giving more wide publicity about these rights, though the rights are common, and the patient rights, that is, patient rights are a part of human right, and until the rights are rights aren't the rights if someone can take them away, then it become a privilege. So there is a difference between the privilege and the rights. So in our healthcare settings, we provide a separate queue and many other facilities which are required for the geriatric friendly clinic approach, like proper chairs, proper lighting, and wheelchair, and a lot of other things. So those things are privileges, but I have inquired from the ministry persons also that there is no separate guidelines, written documents are available for elderly people. But if we'll provide these general charter of patient rights, then also it will be good. So they have the right to information. So they can seek the information as per their requirement. Then they can access the reports or records, their personal records, or their caregivers can access to these records and reports. Then they have the right to access the emergency medical care. If so, no one can deny the emergency medical care provided these facilities are present at the center. So they have the right to be informed. So a medical professional should obtain consent of the patient or their caregivers, spouse or guardians before any major procedure. So they have the right to confidentiality, human dignity and privacy. So these charters are available, but it is said that these charters should be displayed in every hospital so that these patients realize their rights and they can utilize this thing. Because significant people, percentage, 86% of the geriatrics are not aware of these rights. So they have the right to take second opinion. They have the right to see the transparency in the rates. They have the right for non-discrimination. So no one, we cannot discriminate, or healthcare professionals cannot discriminate or refuse the treatment based on the gender, sexuality, caste, religion, or age. So these rights are have to be displayed, and awareness is required for this. So they have the right to safety, quality care according to the standards. They have the right to choose alternative treatment if other options are available. So healthcare provider has to provide all the different methods and options which are available. They have the right to choose source for obtaining medicines or tests. So no one can compel them to purchase the medicine from their hospital or at a specified site, but this is the right of the person to choose if they want to select it from some other outlet which is providing better medicine or at a cheaper rate. So patients have the right to for proper referral and transfer. They have the right to protection of patient involved in clinical trials. So if they want to deny, they can easily deny. They have the right to protection of participants involved in biomedical and health research. They have the right to be educated about the various options available, various diseases, and they have the right to be heard and seek redressal. So these charters are required to be displayed in every hospital, especially the government hospitals and also the private hospitals.
Sorry, Dr. Kakkar, to interrupt you. We are running a little late on schedule. May I please request you to finish in the next couple of minutes, and then we can come back during the discussion if there are things that you would. So you can take the next couple of minutes to just highlight the key issues with respect to elderly care in healthcare facilities. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Actually, I've already described that sometimes it is so common that even healthcare professionals, policy makers, and family people or individual, everyone is thinks that due to age, certain things are there, but everyone has to be prepared for these changes. So sometimes individual also take it for granted that okay, it may be due to old age, and ageism is present at all levels. and stereotyping is present at all levels. So this can be removed by the proper awareness at all levels. So it should not be dealt at the single level, but strategy is required to cover at different levels. So that is the thing which I want to convey. Then the rest of the things I can discuss with during the discussion. If, so, okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the insight on those subjects. I am sure everybody present here will be definitely benefit from these discussions. I would now like to call on the next panelist for today evening, Dr. Nishant Menon, to discuss his thoughts on the role played by healthcare providers. Before I invite him, I would like to introduce Dr. Menon. Dr. Menon presently is appointed as the consultant emergency medicine at Amala Institute of Medical Sciences, Kerala. As a clinician, he is involved in emergency care, geriatric care, and end-of-life care. And he's also passionately involved with collaborative researches in the field of geriatrics, family medicine, and primary care, as well as critical illness. So I would now like to invite Dr. Menon. Sir, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll share the screen. Okay, I would like to thank HSTP for the invitation, and thank you, Dhanak, for the kind introduction. The PPT is visible, right?
Yes, that's visible.
Yeah, okay. So I would just like to add on to what the other speakers have actually mentioned here. The clarity with which Rajiv Sadanandan sir spoke about the topic is exactly what I would also like to highlight. Also, I would like to add my own few experiences, which has actually gone into which has actually gone into a few of the slides here. So, like I happen to represent the young generation of doctors who actually want to specialize in geriatrics, but are unfortunately unable to specialize in India. So, I would like to start with my own story.
Yes, sorry to interrupt you. Could you please go on presentation mode so that your slides are visible in full?
Okay. Is it now fine?
No, you'll have to F5. If you do, you will go on full view of presentation. Otherwise, we can continue like this. It's visible here.
Okay. This is fine.
Yes, this is fine. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like it all started like I wanted to specialize in geriatric medicine, but after my graduation, there were just a couple of seats. One was at CMC Vellore, and the other was somewhere in Madras Medical College. So both of the seats I couldn't get into. So the next option which is left was a postgraduate diploma in geriatric medicine offered by the Indira Gandhi National Open University. So I enrolled for that. And the very next year, it came out that the Medical Council, the then Medical Council of India, actually asked IGNOU to stop such a course because it was not recognized by MCI. So that put an end to my journey into geriatrics, but then that passion was already there. So again, like why I wanted to pursue a career in geriatric medicine was exactly what the other speakers spoke about, like to 10 to 15% of the Indian population are geriatric, and so it holds immense potential as a career prospect as well as for the benefit of patients. So the second thing which I just want to emphasize is that even after almost 10 years, we have almost 650 medical colleges in India and roughly a figure very close to 1 lakh seats in medicine. of which only around 16 colleges are having approximately 60 seats in MD Geriatrics. That was 4 till the year 2017. It has drastically increased during the past 5 years. So that is the current status of geriatric medicine training in India. So there are other fellowship programs being held in at least a few states, like in Kerala, we have at Amrita. Then in Tamil Nadu, we have at Vellore, in Karnataka, and somewhere in the north, we have few identified pockets of medical colleges which are offering some fellowship courses for those who are interested in geriatric care. But otherwise, the seats are just limited to 60. And then coming to the clinical care status, clinical elderly care status, we have a lot of preventive clinics in India, but these are mostly laboratory driven and are driven by investigations more than the holistic care model wherein the patient as a whole is to be treated. So these are the latest additions to the realm of geriatric medicine, where an operational guideline came into force last year, which is the NPHCE, that is the National Program for Healthcare of the Elderly. And luckily, that is something which is a concrete document. When I just randomly went through a few documents which came since 2011, this is the more concrete of all those things. And there are two things which are good prospects for healthcare workers and doctors to pursue careers in geriatric medicine. So that is setting up of geriatric clinics at subcenter level, PHC level, CHC level, the general hospital levels, and then regional geriatric care centers at tertiary care centers. So they are also describing the staff pattern, the faculty required, the clinical psychologist, nurse, medical social worker, physiotherapist, other departments which are associated with geriatric care, etc. And that is actually a good thing to go about it. Now coming to my assessment of the problem with the care of an elderly patient at a clinical level. Like it is not, you're not speaking or you're not caring for just the elderly patient as a clinician. The problem is that of a relative who is probably the caregiver, or they have outsourced it to some other external agencies who are providing with a caregiver or something like a home nurse. And then there are other associated healthcare providers, like, for example, they might be having a family physician who is holistically looking after the patient, but otherwise they might be doctor shopping around, going to the gastroenterologist for pain abdomen, to the neurologist for headache and things like that. So the elderly patient actually presents as an opportunity wherein you have so many people who are probably distant from the patient himself or herself. And this elderly patient is heavily dependent on these people. So whenever there is an information flow, like we are talking about patient autonomy, patient's privacy, and informed consent. So all these things get diluted when you have a lot of relatives. For example, we always see a lot of people, like the son or the daughter of an elderly patient comes and asks very in a concerned tone about the patient's condition. But then immediately we have the spouse of the so-called son or daughter who then comes up and asks the same questions again. But then their idea of care to the mother-in-law or the father-in-law is different. So the flow of information and the dependency factors all actually do a lot of dilution to the type of care which we tend to give to routine patients. So the factors differentiating elderly healthcare from other patients are like, there are a lot of social obligations for the elderly patients. Then there are justifications on the part of the patient, like the patient might not want to get admitted because they have a grandchild who is alone at home. So they don't want to trouble the caregivers, the son or the daughter. Excuse me. Then there are other social pressures, and maybe the parent is being exploited for money or whatever by their relatives or caregivers. There is also abuse. So we don't know. The patient might present with the presentation might be headache, but it could be something like an abuse or some panic or some psychological event, a depressive episode, secondary to all these things. So there are some specific geriatric things when it comes to the history examination and investigations pertaining to the geriatric patients. For example, the history of a patient might be quite different from that of the informant. Like the informant might be a good son or a good daughter who is extremely concerned and wants a detailed evaluation if it's a good son or a daughter. But on the other side, we do have people who would come up with things like they would like to underplay whatever history is being provided by the elderly. And so is it with regards to examination, investigations, etc. For example, we have recently started some health insurance policies by the Kerala government. And so we have a lot of people coming with the health insurance. So people demand for a CT head, even if it is not indicated, just because they have this health insurance. So the son or the daughter just wants a full body scan for a patient, even if that is not indicated, just because they have got this health insurance now, and they would like to have a one-stop evaluation of their parent, even if it is not indicated in true sense. So we have it in both sense, like it could be detrimental as well as over empathetic. Now coming to the rights of the elderly patients, which Dr. Kakkar was mentioning, like the right to personal dignity and respectful care is not specific to the elderly, but when it comes to the elderly, we need to understand that there might be somebody who might have been a dignified person in their working years, and now they're having a peaceful life, a peaceful retired life. So that doesn't mean that they might be dressed in an executive sense coming to the hospital. They might be coming in their routine clothes when they come for a checkup, and we tend to underplay the sort of dignity based on the looks, or maybe the dressing sense, or maybe the way they come. So everyone deserves the personal dignity and respect. Then coming to information on diagnosis, treatment, and medicine, every patient, not just the elderly, has got the right to know more about their diagnosis, treatment, and medicines. Of course, I wouldn't be elaborating on all these things. Then something which I would like to add on from my personal experience regarding the information about healthcare professionals involved in medical care is an altogether different domain. When I was in Delhi, at one of the famous hospitals in Delhi, doing my critical care training, I did find one of the doctors who was transporting an elderly patient to this hospital from another famous hospital. He introduced himself as a doctor, but then quickly I realized that he was not even a doctor. He was probably somebody with a homeopathic background, but not an allopath. But he was introducing himself as the in charge of the critical care for that night. So there are even good hospitals, corporate hospitals, where you don't have legitimate healthcare professionals involved with medical care. It's all outsourced for various reasons. And when it comes to government setup, again, we have legitimate healthcare professionals, but again, like these people.
Hello. Yeah, we can hear you, Dr. Menon. Just to interrupt you, sorry, since we are running late, could you please wind up in the next minute or so? Hello.
I think his screen has frozen.
Let's wait for a few seconds for him
Yeah.
to come back on screen.
Hello.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Dr. Menon,
So,
just sorry to
just-
interrupt you. Since we are running short of time, could you please wind up in the next 1 minute
Yeah,
or so?
sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So these are my last two slides, where again, these are all the various rights. One is to to refuse to participate in human experiments, clinical research or project. This again is a debatable topic because there are many institutions which go ahead with a good protocol, good clinical research protocols, but there are also institutions where these are neglected and people are enrolled to various research experiments without their consent. So coming to my last slide, one of my professors in medicine used to tell me something, and I've quoted this. The older person in front of you is not merely a case or disease, but a human being with an identity, some unique characteristics and experience of a lifetime. So these are things which we need to respect. It's not that it is just a disease, maybe an SLE or a rheumatic heart disease who is coming in front of you. It's not a case of rheumatic heart disease, but it is Mr. So-and-so who is a respectable human being with an identity. He could have been the manager of the State Bank of India in one of the nearby branches, but now he's retired and he has got some unique characteristics which he has developed during his lifetime. So this is how we need to actually reorient the healthcare worker, irrespective of whether he's a doctor or a nurse or a budding graduate. Everyone has to actually reorient themselves in the care of elderly in this broader sense. That's what I feel. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your valuable experiences and thoughts on this issue. I'm sure that everybody present here has appreciated, and it was a pleasure listening to your take on the same. Thank you. I would now like to invite our third panelist for today evening, Dr. Geeta Narayan. Dr. Geeta Narayan has a doctorate in international relations from JNU. She has retired as a program officer with the United Nations Population Fund 3 years back. She has over 25 years of experience in the developmental sector. And today evening, she'll be sharing her experience as a caretaker of an elderly and the concerns she has faced in doing so as a representative of the patients. Ma'am, please, over to you.
Geeta ma'am, you have to please unmute yourself. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much for inviting me for this wonderful evening. And I think it's a very, very critical topic that we're all discussing. And I think the earlier speakers also put it so beautifully. And there's so many points that we can all take back with us, as we start looking at other, colleagues, friends, or, parents, or whoever that we are taking care of. I think there's so much to learn from this. And I, as a caregiver, would like to broadly, keep my experience in fact, categorize it under three broad categories. One, I look at it from the angle of an institution, both the home as well as the hospitals. And secondly, the paramedics or the healthcare workers. And third, as a caregiver myself. So this is broadly, it'll be very difficult to keep to a particular, issue. It'll always be crisscrossing and moving about. But I'd like to start with the family. And I think to a large extent, it's very important that when we are in a family taking care of an older person, what is most important is, especially for somebody like me who took care of an elderly mother who's past 94. So I will not say it was difficult for me, but the very fact that I was able to take voluntary retirement and be with her was because although there was an attendant in the house, I wanted to make sure that there was enough supervision. She was not left alone in the hands of of an attendant. So I thought that this is the best time for me to give back to what she gave me as a child when I was growing up. And all that they look forward is to have some love, some affection, and basically a reassurance that somebody is there with me. I'm not left alone. Because I'm sure, even if at that point in time an old person is unable to express herself or himself, they have something, going in their minds. And the moment they find that there's no familiar face around, immediately they withdraw themselves into some kind of a depression or something which tells them, look, they've kind of abandoned me. I mean, it comes automatically. I think as we are also aging, we are also getting there now. When we don't have familiar people around, we don't have friends to talk to, we automatically start thinking, oh, am I alone? There's nobody here. What will I do suddenly if I fall down? So I'm sure this is also something that's crossing their minds at that point in time. So I thought all that she was looking forward to was, my being around. And fortunately or unfortunately, I was the only caregiver. I have an older husband, of course, and he was always there to support me. But in terms of having my daughter around, there's nobody else in the house. So I thought I was the primary caregiver and I had to actually live up to that kind of supportive role. And the biggest challenge for me was this all happened during COVID times. The pandemic, when it hit us, I mean, we didn't know what to do because she was not vaccinated. She was not mobile. And we couldn't just bring her from the room to a hospital or to even a nursing home somewhere. And unfortunately, the house I live in, we don't have a lift here. We only have 4 floors. And at that point in time, we never thought of a lift. And now it is too late for us to think of a lift and bring her down. So she was not vaccinated. Both the pandemic went the first year. The second year again was a big challenge for us. I knocked at so many doors, MCDs, so many government friends that I knew. I asked them, I said, could you have somebody come and vaccinate her? And the only answer I kept getting is, it's not there as yet. And I thought, this is a time to prioritize to see when there are so many old people, not just in Delhi, but the world over. Why not have this kind of facility from the time the pandemic broke? That is the time, I think, instead of prioritizing, people up to the age of 40, then up to 60, or whatever those, different slabs were, at least the older people should have been given a priority. Younger people could have always gone to the hospital, which they did. But for older people, it was a major challenge. And she died unvaccinated. That was my biggest tragedy, that despite having taken her to a hospital when, the last 2 months before she passed away, she, went into some kind of breathing problem and I had to take her to the hospital. And what is ironical is I take her there to the hospital and she was tested for COVID positivity. Fortunately, she was not positive. But then I requested the doctors there. I said, if you could test her for COVID, if she could be tested for COVID, why not you give her a vaccination? And again, the answer I get here is, sorry, we don't provide vaccination in this hospital. It's a very reputed hospital. And I was really surprised. I said, how can you have somebody coming into your hospital only being tested for being either positive or negative, but not providing a vaccination? Well, that is another story, long story we could go into. And the second thing that I saw was, she was admitted into an ICU because she was breathless at the point in time when I took her. And she was taken in an ICU. And ICU, of course, relatives, nobody's allowed to walk in and be with the patient for a long time. So the first day passed, all kind of tests happening, everything. And I was quite sure that she must have been missing me because she's always been seeing me around the house. And that first day passed when I went and, that half an hour window that we get, and I went into the hospital to see her, I realized there was cold food lying on the bedside, and she hadn't taken a breakfast. I mean, who do you ask? I mean, which doctor do you ask? And this is the same doctor who had treated her nearly 25 years ago for a stent. And that is a doctor who's attending on her. Of course, he was not the only man responsible. There were several nurses coming, there were other people who were coming to the room, but well, that is the care that is being given. Nobody bothered to, take care of her. Even her hair is kept unkempt, A lady who's lived in dignity. I mean, we spoke of dignity a while back. Two of these speakers did speak of dignity. How do you assure a dignity like this? And I'm sure the kind of training that is being provided to these health workers ought to include something like this, that when an elderly person comes into the hospital, he or she cannot be treated like an ordinary patient. You definitely need to see how else you can make their lives a little more comfortable. longevity is something which, the organs start failing one by one because you're already so old. But can they live with dignity? That little time that they're in the hospital, can you provide that extra, help for that patient? I mean, that was all my plea to the hospital. I, in fact, wrote also and left this note in the hospital. I don't know how much of attention that would have, got there. I really don't know. And the second aspect that I'm talking about is the paramedics, the role of the paramedics. Well, there are some very nice people that you come across. I'm not saying everybody needs to be very courteous and see, that's a part of their work. That's a work culture, I suppose, here in India, especially in India. Abroad, when I have seen in hospitals, the paramedics, treat just even an ordinary patient with so much of care, love, and affection. So why not in India? Somewhere, and it's not that they're not getting trained. Everybody is getting trained. We have lovely hospitals here. But let's just add that little bit to our training programs here, where this geriatric care becomes a little more important. One fine day, we're also going to be there. So we can't just, brush it off saying, well, here's an old person. And I think in one of the slides, I think Dr. Menon showed, or was it Dr. Kakkar who showed, two old men sitting there. They're old. What have they done? I mean, unfortunately, they're living that long. But somebody needs to pay attention to them. And who pays attention to them, especially when they reach a hospital or some place where, this care is being given? Just add that little dignity to their lives. So this is what I'd like to look at. And the third aspect I'd talk about is the caregivers, my personal experience in terms of being the only person in the house looking after my mother. A point came when, I was finding it really difficult to cope with the anxiety, looking at her condition. The attendant and I were the only two people who were actually talking. My husband was definitely there supporting me. But, it's not the same as someone did mention, he's after all a son-in-law in the house. It's not the same as a daughter taking care of the mother. So, my conversations with him was very different from what I would have loved to have with maybe a daughter or my niece or a brother or a sister, which unfortunately I didn't have anybody in the house at that point in time. So even at that point in time, I came across a very nice organization. I don't want to name that organization, but I'm sure you all know which organization that is. They came every week, they would come to the house with a counselor in tow, and that counselor is to spend half an hour with me, talk to find out how I felt, because that is also very important. Now, I need some sounding board to talk about my issues, my anxieties, what had happened to my mother. These are natural to, come about in any caregiver's time. But someone to help me ease my tensions, that was very important. For almost, I think, about 6 or 7 visits, regularly a counselor used to come to the house. A doctor would come, a nurse would come, and they would, ensure that she was given the right kind of, support. Just coming, sitting and talking. And surprisingly, my mother, till a day before she passed away, she's fully conscious. She wouldn't talk, of course, but everything would register. So just the fact that a doctor would sit with her, hold her hand, and just ask her, something nice, or talk about how did you sing, did you eat well, did you have a bath, or whatever, some little conversation. So conversation is also equally important, both for the patient as well as the caregiver. So I think I'll end with this. I'm getting a little emotional now, but thank you so much for inviting me and allowing me to express my ideas. Of course, I would like one more point here, but I think we can probably take it up in the question answer session. And because when I spoke about not having a lift in the house, urban planning comes into effect here. That's a much larger issue. It's more technical. But I think from now on, it's difficult to unwind what we've already done and what we're going through. But as time comes and we move forward, I think any person who's going to build a house or somewhere, anything which is above the first floor must have a lift. Just for an economically weaker section, somebody from that thing, they could have a different kind of a design. But urban planning is a very, very crucial thing and must look at issues like this, which is not only disability friendly spaces that we're looking at. Even for people who are old, we need to have some more conveniences so that people are able to move them around and give them better quality of life. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. And on behalf of the entire HSTP team, I would really like to Thank you for narrating and telling your heartfelt experiences. And I really appreciate your strength for narrating it so beautifully, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving forward, I would now like to invite Dr. Dhwani Mehta. I would to shed light on the loss of the decision-making capacity of patients, and also to discuss about legislative provisions to which ensure the rights of the elderly. Dr. Dhwani is the co-founder at Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, Lead Health. She has worked specifically on research projects on end-of-life care, pharmaceutical and medical device regulations, among others. She has a doctoral degree from University of Oxford and has also been the editor of Oxford Human Rights Hub blog. I welcome you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the kind introduction. And thank you to HSTP for inviting me to speak on this. This is a subject that I feel very passionately about. So not just because I've been working on issues related to end-of-life care for the last few years, but also because I also recently lost my 87-year-old grandmother who was suffering from a chronic progressive lung disease. And that shed a whole, I mean, I began to see the questions and issues around healthcare for the elderly from a different lens after that experience. So it's something I feel very strongly about. And so I'm very happy to be a part of this panel today and to hear all, everyone's perspectives on this. There's been a wealth of information that everyone's already provided. Dr. Narayan has been, very touchingly narrated her experience. I will speak briefly about three things. One is the legal framework around end-of-life care. So obviously this is something that can impact all persons, but is something that is perhaps on the mind of an elderly population, a little more. So I'll speak about what the current process is for the execution of advanced medical directives and how it is onerous and cumbersome to expect elderly patients to currently execute living wills in the manner that the law provides for. I'll also speak briefly about some research that my colleagues at Vidhi, Kim and D'Souza and Akshat Agarwal have done on the legal framework for decision-making in persons with impaired capacity. Now, of course, again, this includes a range of different kinds of populations, persons with intellectual disabilities, persons with acute brain injuries, but it also includes perhaps disproportionately, or it includes a significant section of the elderly population because, of conditions like progressive dementia, Alzheimer's, etc. So what happens when elderly persons begin to lose that decision-making capacity and what the law can and cannot do about it is something that I'd like to touch upon. And finally, I can talk very briefly about the 2007 legislation on maintenance and welfare for senior citizens. I mean, that's more to do with general support for senior citizens from their, from their children. But there are a couple of sections in there about medical support as well. So I'll briefly explain what those positions are. Although this is not a legislation that I am very well versed with. So please excuse me if I'm not able to share any great insights on it. So just briefly beginning with the first one, as far as the execution of living wills goes, I'm sure most people are aware that after a 2018 judgment of the Supreme Court, advanced medical directives are now legally valid documents in India. So this means that any person who is 18 and above can execute a living will that states that at any time in the future, when they might lose their decision-making capacity, they should be, life-sustaining treatment should be withheld or withdrawn should some other conditions be met. And they can also, under this directive, appoint a surrogate decision maker or a healthcare, or give their healthcare power of attorney to someone else so that this person can take decisions on their behalf at a time when they themselves do not have the capacity to understand the consequences of healthcare decisions. So this is a very progressive step. Then, previous law commission reports have actually recommended that such wills not be given legal recognition because of fear of misuse. Again, the fear here is that you will have grasping relatives who will be looking to snatch your property, and therefore, in order to protect elderly patients, you should not vest this kind of power in in persons to exercise their autonomy, because there is a fear that this will not be used correctly. But I think the Supreme Court finally recognized that being able to take decisions like this for yourself in the future is an important extension of the right to autonomy, dignity, and privacy under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So now these are legally valid documents. The catch, though, is that these are very difficult documents to execute. So they must be executed before your nearest judicial magistrate of the first class, and they must be signed by 2 independent witnesses and countersigned by the judicial magistrate himself or herself. So I tried to do this. So I tried to get my grandmother to execute an advance medical directive. We went to the magistrate's court in Bhoiwada in Bombay. We were told by the magistrate that they had no idea what this judgment was about. They were not aware of any of these provisions. They didn't know that they had any responsibilities under it. And while they appreciated and sympathized with the situation, they hadn't received any directions about how they should go about helping any person to execute such a living will. Since then, there have been a few instances of people having managed to execute these wills. In fact, now in Delhi, I've assisted, my colleagues and I have assisted a couple of persons, actually at 2 ends of the age spectrum. One, a young engineering student who felt very strongly about these issues, and 2, an 80+ woman with terminal stage cancer who feels very passionately about the fact that she should not be subjected to life-sustaining treatment. So the procedure that we followed, again, if this is of interest to people who are listening, who may want to execute their own wills, is that we went to the concerned district court. We made an administrative application before the district judge, asked them to designate a judicial magistrate before whom the living will could be executed. So it was a time-consuming process. This person would not have been able to do it if she hadn't had legal support from us. So this is not the ideal way to get people to execute these documents, and this is not accessible to the common citizen. And currently we are pursuing an application in the Supreme Court requesting the court to modify the requirements for allowing people to execute advanced medical directives. So if you look at most countries, it's absolutely fine if the will is executed and then notarized. Sometimes not even notarized. All it needs is 2 independent witnesses. So we have requested that the court change its requirements and allow people to execute wills that can be countersigned by a notary public, and that should be enough for the will to be considered a legally valid document. So let's, we'll see how. We're hopeful that the court is able to address some of these issues. But currently it's a challenge and certainly a challenge for an elderly person to go to court, to wait around for hours for the judge to get off their break and to find 2 witnesses to come back to execute their directives. This is not a reasonable expectation, certainly for an elderly patient. The second issue that I said that I talk about, and as I said, is a report that my colleagues have worked on in more detail than I have, is India's legal framework or lack thereof for persons with impaired decision-making capacity. So we have 3 frameworks that are somewhat relevant, but that are not enough to cover all the gaps that are needed. And first, maybe I should highlight what the problem is here, right? As in, so what happens when you begin to lose decision-making capacity? One is, of course, it becomes difficult to take medical or healthcare decisions for yourself, and there is no official recognition of who amongst your next of kin would be the appropriate surrogate decision maker. So that's one. The other is that again becomes difficult to manage your day-to-day affairs, your finances, your property. Sometimes, you know, you might need to enter an assisted living home, but who will take that decision for you? How will that be financed? How will that be managed? Currently there is no, I mean, these are the problems that arise when you lose that decision-making capacity, and there is no clear answer from the law as to how this will be addressed. Other countries have advanced care planning laws where, in addition to executing an advanced medical directive, which is for healthcare decisions, you can also execute a general advanced care directive where someone can be appointed a proxy or a surrogate or a guardian to take all kinds of other decisions on your behalf should you lose that kind of decision making capacity in the future. And there are very well established processes for how this should be done, how this should be supervised to ensure that there is no abuse of this power and position. There are boards that are set up in place to across other jurisdictions in different contexts from India. So I'm not suggesting that this is something that should be replicated here, but just to give everyone an understanding of the fact that other legal frameworks in other countries account for this loss of impaired decision-making capacity. So in India, currently it's a gray area. The Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act has a provision for appointing a limited guardian or limited guardianship, but it's unclear what that really means, how that process is to be pursued. During the course of our research, we didn't really find anyone who had used or relied on that process. The other legislative framework, of course, is the Mental Health Care Act, but again, that's under that legislation, you can execute advanced directives primarily for someone to take decisions about the treatment of your mental illness on your behalf. So not decisions for other aspects of your life where you might also need to exercise decision-making capacity. So what's the option in this kind of case? So let's assume you have an elderly patient.
Vani, and sorry to interrupt you. We're running really short on time.
Sure.
May I request you to wind up in the next minute or so, please? Sorry about that.
All I wanted to say is that currently the process by which this is addressed is that people approach the High Court to get a guardian appointed under the parents patriae jurisdiction of the High Court under Article 226. So once the High Court appoints a guardian, that guardian can then take decisions on that person's behalf. But it is a very cumbersome process to have to approach the High Court to get something like this done. So we don't have a legal fix for something like this. So I'll stop there, and if there are any questions about the 2007 Act, I can address them in the Q&A.
Thank you, ma'am. That was an extremely insightful and thought-provoking session, and I'm sure that the listeners have totally benefited from it. Thank you so much. I would now like to invite our next speaker, Dr. Mohammad Qadir Miran, to share his experiences and perspectives as well as challenges in the existing system and his opinion on grievance redressal process. Dr. Miran is a physician, an independent researcher, and an avid activist for patient rights. He is also the author of Patient Rights in India, and this book was reviewed by leading national level news portals and papers. So, sir, now I would request you to please take on the session. Over to you.
Thank you, Danak. I first of all thank HSTP, Rajiv sir, Sunil sir, and all other dignitaries for giving me an opportunity to present about patients' rights and problems faced by the patients and caretakers in their grievance redressal process. So, can you see the PPT?
Yes, sir, it's visible, but could you please put it on the presentation mode?
Yeah. Actually, when I click the presentation mode, it's not getting shared. I will manage with this only. Okay. First of all, I want to emphasize about the NHRC Patients' Rights Charter 2018. National Human Rights Commission has adopted this Patients' Rights Charter in 2018 based on existing legal provisions from IPC Clinical Establishment Act and various Supreme Court and High Court judgment. NHRC also directed Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, State Health Departments, Consumer Protection Council, Quality Council of India, and all other legal bodies to implement this charter in their jurisdiction. It has this NHRC charter is supposed to be placed in local language and also in English in each hospital according to the NHRC order. There is a photograph of Patients' Rights Charter displayed in this slide. You can see 7 rights of the patients are given in one column and patients' responsibilities are given in one column. This is the way this charter is being displayed in all the private hospitals in the country. But if you look at the original Patient Rights Charter, it enumerates 17 unique rights. And those rights comprise, that document consists of 27 pages. In that, only one page consists of patient's duties or patient's responsibilities. But wherever this charter is placed in hospitals, more emphasis is given to the patient's responsibilities. And this is also a reason patients are not able to understand what legal rights they do have while seeking medical care. So whenever a patient goes to a hospital, particularly a private hospital, his rights, he always expects that his rights should be upheld. When he knows beforehand that this hospital doesn't have competent doctor or some facilities, he will not be going to that particular hospital. And when the patient suffers some damage or negligence, then only the patient realizes that his rights are compromised. So what to do when a patient's rights is compromised, or when the patient is suffering from a case of negligence or given substandard care? This is a complicated process because in India, there is no single way or single legal mechanism to address this issue. So whenever a patient is suffering in that way, first of all, he should write a written request to the concerned hospital's medical superintendent or manager to provide all the inpatient records. While submitting that letter, the patient should mention that under MCI Code of Ethics Regulations, clause 1.3.2, all this record should be given to him within 74 hours, 72 hours. Okay, and in case of death of the patient, always insist for an autopsy that will be helpful to prove the cause of death and negligence, if at all has happened from hospital side or doctor side. If there is a criminal negligence criminal case has to be filed through police using IPC 304. And if there is civil negligence or deficiency of service or substandard care, a civil case has to be filed for compensation and damages. And if there is a professional misconduct or ethical negligence from the hospital, from the doctor's side, a separate complaint has to be filed to the State Medical Council against that doctor. In addition to that, if the hospital is accredited to NABH or JCI, the complaint should be made to them also, and also to district health authorities. So this is a very complicated process. It's not possible for a layman to understand this, because many a times people think that we file a police case and that is done. Obviously that will progress as a criminal negligence case, but they will not be getting any compensation without approaching consumer courts. So it is very difficult in our country to educate the patient and to uphold their rights in current legal setup. I will skip this slide because we are running short of time. Okay. Whenever a patient's expectation is to get the best quality of care or the standard of care. According to Consumer Protection Act 2019, standard of care is something, the level of standard for which the patient paid the money, or if it is a government healthcare setup, the level of care that is promised to the patient. So if the quality of healthcare, standard of healthcare is ensured to the patient, then definitely patient's rights will not be compromised. So quality of healthcare can be assessed based on availability and accessibility of resources and services, and then technical competence of healthcare personnel, accessibility of healthcare personnel, and outcome of care. I will tell one case for each headings, and you will understand how patients are suffering in our country. Okay, so the first heading, availability and accessibility of resources. I would like to tell about this subhead using the example of PMJAY. Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana is the largest centrally funded health insurance scheme in our country. The National Health Authority is the apex organization funding and overseeing the implementation of PMJAY. Here, insurance companies signs a memorandum of understanding with concerned state government or union territories, and based on the memorandum of understanding and the services agreed upon, the packages are offered to the insured person. So according to the NHA's classification, there are different level of health insurance given to the beneficiaries under PMJAY scheme. There is a health benefit package 1.0 version, 2.0 version, 2.1 and 2.2. Over the year, 1.0 was the primitive package introduced in 2018, and it has improved to 2.2 as of now. The list of procedures and cost covered are different in each packages. Some states like Tamil Nadu, Karnataka are still offering only HBP 1.0 only. Delhi and other states are offering 2.0 or higher. This list of procedures covered in this scheme and cost covered under the scheme should be made available in PMJAY website or NHA website or concerned state government website, but these are not made available in website. IRDA Health Insurance Regulation 2016 states that these memorandum of understanding and service agreements made between the insurance company, TPA, and the policy holder should be disclosed to every policy holder. Here you can see this regulation was framed purposely in a way that patient rights can be compromised. It states that these terms and conditions should be disclosed on demand. It doesn't mandate the insurance company or the government to disclose it openly in website or to the individual on their own. And similarly, Right to Information Act 2005, Section 4B states that proactive, when an agreement is done between two publicly funded government bodies, it should be disclosed openly in public. But in case of PMJAY, the National Health Authority doesn't have the memorandum of understanding signed between various state governments and insurance companies. This is the recent RTA reply I received from National Health Authority. You can see the fourth point. They told me to get the memorandum of understanding and the service agreements of PMJAY scheme from concerned state government. Even though I have explained them prior hand that these are proactive disclosure under RTA Act, and as a National Health Authority is the prime body in overseeing and funding the PMJAY scheme, they are supposed to have these documents in their repository. I don't know whether they don't have these documents or they don't want to publish it in public domain. They are not even ready to provide it through RTA also. Then,
Dr. Menon, may I please request you to wind up in next couple of minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
Yeah. This is another issue faced by an elderly patient who was admitted in a corporate multi-specialty hospital for COVID. Being an elderly, she suffered some abuse from her daughter-in-law. Even she was suffering from COVID, even though she admission inside hospital was not indicated to her. She influenced the hospital authorities and admitted her in COVID ward. And one evening she suffered MI, and the subsequent day she was declared dead. When we requested the hospital management to provide the inpatient records under clause 1.2.3 of MCA ethics regulations, we found out that the patient suffered myocardial infarction at evening 5 p.m. Even though she was in COVID ward just next to the ICU, the cardiologist's opinion was sought over phone at 8 a.m. and PCI was not attempted, and thrombolysis was initiated 12 o'clock. Usually we say door to PCI time is 90 minutes. Here, for an inpatient who suffered MI inside the hospital, was not given adequate care, and she was the hospital administration has let her to die. And here in India, most of the government hospitals doctors, resident doctors, are overburdened with the patient's workload. Many times patients' rights and quality of care is compromised. Whenever patients come to us, we will be in a delicate position whether to support the doctors, resident doctors, or support the patients, because when the resident doctors are working for more than 48 hours, definitely the efficiency is compromised. Recently, NMC, if you see on paper, doctors are not overburdened. Doctors or resident doctors are not working for more than 8 hours. This is a document from Tamil Nadu Medical Education Directorate, which states that not even a single doctor is given more than 8 hours of work. So whenever a patient is suffering from any kind of refusal to denial of rights, he can raise complaint through the centralized public grievance redressal and monitoring system. This is available in pgportal.gov.in. So all the central government hospitals and health department related complaints can be raised here. Even if a state government concerned complaint is raised, they are forwarding the complaint to concerned state health department by post. For patients who are denied of their legal rights, there are bodies or organizations which are helping them in seeking legal measures. People for Better Treatment is one such organization which are helping patients. Similarly, for filing a case, district level legal aid is available. State Legal Services Authority and National Legal Services Authority would be helpful for the patient. So suggestions to uphold patients' rights are: patients' education is the key to ensure patients' rights. Patients' rights should be taught in medical curriculum. There should be intersectoral coordination between hospital, insurance company, government health department, and the judiciary. Transparency is the key. So whatever the resources are available, terms and conditions, regulations are available, that has to be put up in public domain to ensure those. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Menon. That was indeed a very enlightening and highly informative session. On behalf of the entire HSTP team, I would really like to thank all our panelists for their highly valuable insights and for sharing their experiences with us. And it was a pleasure to have all of you on board today with us. Thank you so much. I would now like to invite Rajiv sir to kindly moderate the question and answer session for today evening. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Dhanak. We are over the time limit by 11 minutes, but I guess just as patients have rights, the participants also have rights, and one of that is the chance to ask questions. So if the panelists will grant me another 20 minutes of overshooting of time, let's take it up 7 o'clock. Is that okay with the panelists? Because you're going to be handling most of the questions. So what we'll do is that we'll stop at 7 o'clock if questions, or when the questions run out. I hope that's okay with the panelists.
Yes.
I'll take the silence to be a consent and then go ahead. Yeah. Do we have any questions? Who has the first question, or to any of the panelists?
Rakesh sir, would it be okay like if I just ask live here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I see another question and answer.
Yeah.
Can you look at that?
Yeah, so there is a question from Meghna Singh.
Yeah, can
She's
you please
asking,
read that, Pallavi?
yeah, so she's asking, do you feel that our system is in line with right to dignity of our old patients?
Yeah, so may I pass that to Dr. Kakkar?
Yeah. Actually, our system is right now preparing, and we have seen a lot of burden in our OPDs, but I think at right now it is not well prepared, because a lot of trainings are required for healthcare professionals at different levels, and more pooling of resources are required to prepare more such geriatric wards, and geriatric seats are required. So policy level decisions are required, and moreover trainings at different level with the help of NMC. So if NMC directs all the medical colleges to display and the patient charter, so that everyone will be well aware of these rights. So it should be made mandatory by the NMC or MCI, and more such type of trainings should be directed to every colleges, so that all our health system gear up for taking their needs. So no one will be denied actually for to provide the patient care. I have seen some of the OPDs are overflooded, like in orthopedics in our AIMS Bhatinda, and medicine and all. Some of the OPDs are overflooded. So even sometimes doctor want to help them, but sometimes they have to wait for a long time. So
no, Dr. Kakkar, I agree that is true of many of the government hospitals, and the load that is on them. But many of the rights that you listed out are not denied, not only to older patients, but also to any patient.
Other patient, yeah.
Other patients. So like transparency or right to know rates and so on. So do you think a reorientation of the
medical professionals,
attitude of healthcare professionals would be something that would be useful?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Such type of trainings should be organized in every institute, so to make them more sensitive towards their demand of a geriatric people. And I think in AIMS like institutes, we are committed, and media quickly highlights if any such episodes come to their mind. And so I think in some of the hospital, I agree that facilities may not be there in some district hospitals, but facilities are definitely there in many of the INIs, but attitude change is required at all levels.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kakkar. Any other question?
We have one question. They're asking, how can I connect for more information, as I missed a lot?
You should answer that, Pallavi.
Yeah, I'll do that. So we'll have a report put up of the webinar on our website in the next few days, and for which we will have, we'll put together the information from all the panelists' presentations and the discussion. So you could refer to that report. It will be up in a few days, and we'll send the information when it is uploaded on the website to the participants.
If there are no more questions, I'd like to make a remark to Dhwani Mehta. I agree, because as someone who's been trying to set it up for my personal need, that is the having an advanced living will created, we thought we should make it easy for people, because many people are going to be afraid unless there is a covering government directive or government policy on this. And something we tried to do before the 2018 judgment came. So the path of creating an advanced will was cleared by that epoch-making judgment of 2018. But when we tried to get this done from government sources, the fear of I don't know what, the fear of the popular backlash was so high that we could not get governments to agree to a process. And as you rightly said, not only is executing a will, but even ensuring that you are able to terminate your life itself is so cumbersome under that judgment of the Supreme Court. Because of the fear of abuse, the provisions that are there in the Supreme Court judgment are so onerous that I'm afraid that even if I execute a living will, I will not find it easy to to ensure that I don't have to suffer the indignities of this life support system. Your comments, Dr. Dhwani?
Dhwani, you're on mute.
No, she's not on mute. She's muted.
Now I think she's frozen. We can't hear you. Dhwani, you will switch off your camera and maybe then.
Am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I was just saying that I was at the Supreme Court this morning because the court was hearing an application for modification of its judgment that was filed by the Indian Society of Critical Care Medicine. Thankfully, the court has finally fixed a date for hearing this issue. So on the 23rd of November, we are hoping to be able to in court to convince the court that the directions that it had laid down in its common cause judgment are unworkable and unimplementable, and to consider a way in which to modify them. So I'm hoping that this issue will soon resolve itself. In the meantime, Vidhi has worked with the End of Life Care in India task force to develop a model legal framework around end of life care. So we have a draft bill which sets out an alternate, hopefully less cumbersome procedure, which still has sufficient safeguards to address this. This is up on our website for anyone to see and comment on. So we'd appreciate any feedback. Thank you.
Yeah. So what I was sharing was that the political buy-in of that is good. I found it to be extremely difficult, even in a state like Kerala. So
absolutely.
So, yeah. Yes.
So let's see what the court can do. Yeah.
No, I don't think I don't think it's for the court to do it. It is for in fact, when I was pleading for this, what I said is that it's from a very personal point of view. I don't want to suffer the indignity of having this end of the life kind of this thing. But the fear of backlash is so high. So I hope you succeed.
No, I mean, I agree fully that a legislative framework is what's necessary. But in the absence of that, I hope that the court can modify the the extremely onerous requirements it's currently laid down. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Pallavi.
Yeah, so I wanted to just raise a slightly different question from this. A lot of what we are talking, I heard, is centered around tertiary care and facility level care, which no doubt is important, and all the suggestions that the speakers made about changes in medical curriculum for dignified care are important. I also want to highlight what Dr. Geeta was presenting about her experience of how do we facilitate elderly getting care at home in situations when they can't move out to the facilities, in situations either because of their own physical situation or other reasons. So are there things happening in the health system which can respond to it, or is there a need to sort of start talking about that aspect of healthcare as well?
You're familiar with the community-based palliative care movement, in which counting on the altruism that still exists in our society, people volunteer to be trained as outreach workers, backed by the health workers in the formal system providing this care. And I hope that going forward, when the religious organization and others also kind of join in, this would become a movement, because and mind you, it's not from old age alone. There are people with end stage cancer disease and so on, who also are just neglected. So I hope that the such a movement will catch on in the country. So would any of the panelists like to respond? Sorry, I jumped into it on that answer.
I think during the pandemic, I would like to add one point, that many of the hospitals have already started telemedicine services during this COVID time. And a lot of people have learned. And while I was serving as a medical superintendent at AIIMS Mangalgiri, we initiated app called the Paramash app. So through that app, even the reports can be shared from the patient side or from the doctor side to the patient. So such type of facilities are available, and in future, I think people will be more familiar with such type of facilities, with the provision of more IT friendly services. I think things will improve if they want to get the services from their home.
Thank you, Dr. There's another issue that Dr. Geeta Narayan mentioned, which is very, very important, not only for geriatric patients, but all end stage. The issue of caregivers. They're generally women, and most of them are generally old. And at this point, that is one group. That's the caregivers are one group we haven't, our system has never looked at, because they don't fall within our definition of patient. So that's maybe another area that I think has been highlighted in this issue in this discussion. Yes, Dr. Geeta Narayan. You need to unmute. Yeah.
Yeah.
You need to, yes, please.
Yeah, it was nice of Dr. Kakkar to have raised that telemedicine was available during COVID. But specifically in cases like what I was referring to, my mother's case, several other old people have been there. She had an eye problem. Now, I think on telephone, if you just ask the doctor what should be done, I don't think we're given the right kind of treatment. But we did manage to get one doctor who was willing to come home at that time, because he happened to know a friend's friend. So he kind of obliged and he came. But he didn't have the kind of equipment to look into her eye, because at that point, my mother used to watch the television. But as soon as she developed this problem of, I don't know what it could have been, she refused to even look at the screen. She would keep telling me, Mona, please switch off the lights. She would keep telling me this. So I used to wonder why she used to keep doing that. But then I had no means of getting her to a doctor to at least examine her eye. So I was just left to, God's will as to, I don't know what would happen. She gradually started losing interest. And there also we need to, it's very difficult, yes, to find somebody who can come home, especially during COVID. But even otherwise, if in the area, some places where people live, I think there are some designated doctors or clinics who can probably look at geriatric care, somebody who can come home and look. It just helps a little more. I mean, that was one of my concerns.
Right. We have a question on the chat box. That is, can links be provided for people looking to be part of the elderly care movement, or does anyone have an answer to that question?
There are There are organizations who specifically work with the elderly population. One could connect with them. One that comes to mind is HelpAge India. And there are other organizations also who provide some amount of supportive care at home as well. So maybe if we could, right now it could be difficult, but we can take this up offline. If you could write in to HSTP, we'll share our email ID on this.
Dr. Menon, are you aware of any such networks that people can, those who are interested can connect with?
Yeah, actually, HelpAge India always invites volunteers to intern with, and also Pallium India from Kerala, who are giving awareness, education on the palliative care aspects. These three organizations would be helpful. They are taking medicos also and non-medicos also for volunteering and for training purposes.
Thank you.
Rajat, there's a comment in the quick Q&A box, not really a question. I'll just read that out.
Yeah.
Himanshu Singh is saying hospitals can be intimidating, not only for the patient, but for the attendants as well. Absence of common courtesy, empathy, timely updates are some common concerns raised by attendants.
I think Sunil was interested to answer this.
No, he just said, yeah, he agrees with that. Yeah, he can answer.
No, I'll just two things. One is, I think technology, we need to look at if we can, how can we use technology in terms of apps or providing information. All this information is there somewhere, but when do I get it? How do I get it? I know which is the best pizza to get, or I know where to get my idli sambar, but I really don't know where to go for healthcare services in my country. And why don't we, I keep telling, why don't we have an app that provides services? Another thing with the technology, I think patients' rights, we really, one is the pamphlets, of course, Pallavi, Sonali, we are doing on it. But what I realized when I was working with the Delhi government, that WhatsApp and that mobile is such a powerful instrument in terms of rights. Believe me, when the chief minister would get anything that is happening, corruption in the Molla clinics, somebody has taken money or not given medicines, it would just come up in the WhatsApp group and we would take action. I mean, that's where I found the patient's rights being very exercised. And in the Delhi government, it was not just patients, but it was regarding property. When people used to go to the officer, they would threaten that I'll take a photo, record it, send it across. I mean, that is the rights we are talking about, where people feel empowered to come out and say, boss, if you don't do this, I'm going to take you to task. Whether it is a government hospital or a private is not the issue. I think technology we need to really look at. I will stop at that. And I think it needs to be more activism rather than this goody being nice. And, I mean, somewhere we have to just push. I'm 61, so I'm the one who's going to really push also.
Well, on that note, I mean, okay, I think Sunil has touched a very important point. What is going to happen with the demographic shift that is happening? And that is, as the number of voters become older and older, the issues related to issues of aging are going to get salient. Like the state where I come from, where 15% of the population is aged above 65, this is already showing up. So on the one hand, we have a generic issue of the disconnect between patients and doctors and not doctors, the healthcare system. What Dr. Geeta mentioned, it is not only for geriatric patients but applies for everybody. That is one part, which is a different discussion altogether. In fact, we had the Clinical Establishment Act and other things that we talked about. That is one. The other one is the issues of the age, not only for healthcare, but lots of other issues. I expect that they will become more pressing, and as the demographic shifts and the number of, and the political power kind of shifts towards the elderly voters, I think we're going to see the democratic process ensuring that more attention is paid to these issues. The reason that palliative care came up in Kerala is because the transition took place there first, and we're going to see more of this happening in other states. Already the National Health Mission has agreed this is one of the areas that is eligible for funding. When we first proposed in 2008, people laughed at us, but now it has become part of the standard package. So I think over time, the shift is something that we hope we will see. And I would congratulate the HST team for having kind of flagged up this issue. And we hope that there will be more discussions that happen in this area. Thank you very much. And I'll now invite Sonali to give the concluding remarks and the word of thanks.
I'm really like appreciative and like first and foremost, thanks to each and everyone. For me personally, it was more like an educative session all along. Somebody's telling about the medical issues, somebody's coming up with the legal issues, legal framework, and then Geeta ma'am coming with all the personal experiences, which all are equally important, you know, and the grievance redressals, do we have them or we don't have them? It's very confusing for a common man, I see. And while I was thinking, you know, how we ended, I'm really glad Rajiv sir ended it on a very positive note that things are moving there, because he started, you know, are we missing the bus? So all across 2 hours, I was just thinking like, is the system missing the bus, or, you know, is it catching up on where the current issue is? So I think I really want to end it while there are things are at place, while there are legal frameworks are placed, while there are medical doctors, healthcare workers are doing their best, or they have been trying to, at least with the resources or amenities they have. There are still challenges, and who's asking the caregiver, or who's asking, you know, the elderly patient about the reassurance, about the companionship. So all these points were like equally important. We cannot, I think personally, I feel we cannot prioritize one over the other. They may all have to go together. So I would just like to say thank you, all of you, for, you know, sparing your time, for telling us, sharing your experiences, all your insights on this very highly valuable topic. And it's going to be there, I think. And it's not only, you know, Sunil, important for people of your age group, it is also important of my age group, or, you know, Dr. Meron's age group, because we are going to be there gradually in some years or so. So it's important for all of us to push for this agenda. So I think that's all. And thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dhanak.
Yes, special thanks to Dhanak. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciation.
sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Appreciation for the whole team at HSTP.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.